Hi everyone, it's Marisa from bumblebeeapothecary.com, and today I'm bringing you along for a day in my kitchen where I'm making a couple of fun recipes. I'm going to be showing how I like to make raw milk cream cheese, and then I'm also making a batch of sourdough banana muffins. So I'm also including what we're having for dinner today as well in this video, including everything that I'm doing in the kitchen today. So I'm starting a batch of beef stew, and when I am using stew meat, I like to also include some bones in there to cook along with it, just to add some nice benefits of connective tissue and everything that bones provide whenever you're making a stock or broth, stew, soup, casserole, different things like that. So I have some knuckle bones, some beef knuckle bones in there, some stew meat, and then at this point, I'm just adding some onions. I'm chopping these up into small pieces. I'm also chopping up some garlic cloves, or at least slicing them, peeling and slicing them, and then adding those as well. And then adding some salt and some pepper, a couple bay leaves, and then filtered water just to mostly cover everything. And then I'm putting a lid on and then putting that into the oven. I like to either do 300 degrees Fahrenheit if I'm starting it more in the middle of the day, or if it's earlier in the day, I like to do 275 degrees Fahrenheit. And the water is filtered coming from our faucet because we have an under-counter water filter now. So now that I have dinner started part way, I'm going to go ahead and start on the cream cheese. So this is something that you guys have been requesting to see how you can make cream cheese from raw milk. So this method comes straight from the Nourishing Traditions cookbook. So it actually turns out that there are a variety of ways, like it talks about in Nourishing Traditions, to make homemade cream cheese from raw milk. All that you need is cultured dairy. So this can be the Pima cream from Nourishing Traditions. It can be yogurt. It can be kefir. It can be raw milk that you've allowed to naturally sour to the point where it separates and is thick. Whatever cultured dairy you have, all that you have to do is strain it and then leave it to drip so that all the whey drips out of it. So I'm going to show you that whole process. I'm using kefir just because that's the cultured dairy that I have on hand right now. So I'm just straining out the grains like usual so that I have finished kefir to use. So this is all of my process for just straining my grains out of my kefir. I have these half-gallon jars, strain it into a bowl. I try to be gentle with the kefir grains, put the grains into my next jar. I'll come back and add milk to those later. But then once I have my strained kefir, I have a bag. It's a muslin cotton bag. I believe it's organic. I've had it for a while, so I'm pretty sure it's organic. And then it's also called a nut milk bag is another name for these, and that works too. So it's a drawstring cotton bag. So I pour the cultured dairy, in this case kefir, inside that bag, and then I pull it tight, and then what you need to do is hang it above a container. So I'm hanging it from my cabinet here, and then letting it drip into a container down below. So that's the whey that is dripping down, and then what's going to be left inside the bag is a nice thick concentrated cream cheese. So it takes a while for this process. Usually I leave it overnight, and then sometime the next morning it has completely stopped dripping, and then it's ready to remove and store. So here it is a while later. I moved it to a different cabinet that was less in the way on the counter, but you can see all that whey that has dripped out, and the dripping has slowed a bit. It hasn't stopped though, so it's not finished. Still dripping a bit. Sometimes I'll kind of squeeze it a little bit just to kind of help it keep going, but it's continuing to drip, but it's slowing down, so I'm going to leave it and then check on it a while later. Meanwhile, the other project that I'm doing in the kitchen today is making a batch of sourdough muffins. So this is a 2-day process just because of the fermentation time. So for the first step in the recipe, I am just mixing up the initial things that I want to have, and I am first melting some butter. So I'm melting a cup of butter in my little cast iron skillet here. And then I'm going to be mixing that together with 4 eggs, 1 cup of sourdough starter, and then 4 cups of flour. So for this recipe, I'm using spelt flour. So the first step is to go ahead and just melt that butter, and then I'm adding the flour to my bowl. Have my helper doing some mixing here, and then measuring out my sourdough starter and adding that. And then adding my eggs into the bowl, just mixing it all, trying to not over mix, but mixing enough to where everything is well combined. And then once everything is mixed, I'm going to cover that. I like to use these beeswax wraps. And then at this stage, I'm letting it rest on the counter at room temperature for 6 hours. And then after 6 hours is up, which on this day ended up being about the time that I went to bed, then I went ahead and put the bowl into the refrigerator for the rest of the fermentation time. And then I'm also going ahead and just feeding my sourdough starter here. So I put my rye flour and spelt flour in there, some filtered water, mixing that together, and then sticking that back in the refrigerator. At this point in the day, I'm going to go ahead and take that stew out of the oven. It's been in there for a number of hours. It's pretty close to serving time, actually. I think it has only about an hour left to go. So at this point, I'm going to take those bones out just because they've kind of served their purpose, and I need to make room to add the rest of the vegetables and everything. So I'm adding some tomato paste, some organic tomato paste, some organic vegetables, just a blend of vegetables. And then I'm also adding some potatoes. These are those frozen, already chopped up potatoes that make it really fast and easy. I get those from Azure Standard. And then once those things are added and I stir it around a bit, then I put it back into the oven to finish up the cook time. And then once that cook time for the stew is finished, it's time to go ahead and serve that. So it turned out really good. And I'm just going to go ahead and dish that up, and we're going to enjoy that for dinner. On the side, we have some sourdough rolls with butter, and then our fermented food is sauerkraut. And then this is the next day. So yeah, this is 2 days in my kitchen that I'm bringing you along. And I'm not spending the entire day, let's be clear, in my kitchen in either day. This is just little pockets of time that I choose to go work in the kitchen, and then the rest of the day I'm doing other things, other places. Never want to give the impression that I spend all day in the kitchen, because I most definitely do not. But the next morning, let me just show you where the cream cheese is at. So look at all that whey that dripped out of there. And at this point, it's done dripping. So I make sure that it's done by giving it a squeeze and just moving it around and making sure it doesn't continue to drip. And if it's definitely not dripping, then I know it's done. So then the next step is just to store everything. So I just open up the bag, the drawstring bag that it was in, and then I just scrape all of that lovely cream cheese into a bowl. It's nice and thick. It's tart. It is the most wonderful topping for so many things. We really, really like it. And then you also get a nice big pitcher of whey to store as well. And whey is wonderful to have on hand because you can make electrolyte drinks with it. You can use it to kickstart other ferments. You can use it for just adding probiotic goodness to so many different things. You can ferment things in it. It's really wonderful to have extra whey on hand for different things. There's different recipes that call for it as well, like fermented fish, vegetable medley, things like that. So very nice to have that on hand. So that'll be going into a jar in the refrigerator to store as well. And then the cream cheese will just go in a container in the refrigerator with a lid on it until we're ready to use it. Since this is the next day and the sourdough muffin has sat in the refrigerator overnight, we are ready to go ahead and finish those up and mix the rest of the ingredients into the batter and then bake those. So we are going to do the rest of the mixing in our KitchenAid stand mixer, and this is because it's very thick and cold coming out of the refrigerator, and so it's easiest to mix that in a stand mixer. It would be very difficult to do this by hand. So I'm adding my bananas. I'm adding a bunch of ripe bananas. I think I had like 6 or maybe more. So I'm adding those. Adding 3 teaspoons of vanilla. tablespoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and some of my sucanat. So how much did I end up adding? A couple cups of that, and then putting it into my mixer. And then I go ahead and just let that mix in the mixer, being careful to not over mix, but making sure that everything is well combined. And as soon as it is, then I go ahead and have my muffin pans ready, lined with cups, and then I go ahead and ladle or spoon the batter into those cups. I have my oven preheating at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And then these needed to bake for about 25 minutes once they were ready to go into the oven. And then once they were finished, they were ready to come out and cool. And these are really delicious. And this is not a recipe that I have created myself. It's just one that I like, and I will link to it down in the description box in case you'd like to try it out. But it turned out really good. They puff up nicely. They have a really nice texture, wonderful flavor, and you get to enjoy the benefits of that long fermented sourdough. All right, I hope that you enjoyed coming along for a couple days in my kitchen. Again, not the entire days, but just what I did in the kitchen on those 2 days. Seeing what we had for dinner, making some sourdough muffins, and then making the raw milk cream cheese. And then, like I said, go to Nourishing Traditions for how to make cream cheese if you'd like the written steps. I also plan on putting that on my website as soon as I can. But I will link to where you can get your own copy of Nourishing Traditions if you don't have one already, as well as Sally Fallon's blog, which is a really great resource. And then, like I said, I will also link to that sourdough banana muffins recipe in case you're interested in that. And also check out the description box for links to free ebooks and other things that I have down there that I created for you guys. I also have some meal plans, different things like that. And if you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with anybody else who you think would enjoy it. And if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I get out new videos every week on nourishing recipes and natural living. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.